Agitorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Okay, this is part 3. Part 3 of our study of this document put out by the Dominican priests of Havre in France back in 2013. It's a very excellent study. That's why we're going through it. We're in the middle of page 14. We just looked at the quote of Bishop Follet in his Good Days, where he condemned the idea of signing any agreements without leveling first the principles and the faith. There were doctrinal discussion in Rome from 2009 to 2011 between society theologians and Roman theologians. Yet, these discussions failed miserably, insofar as the Romans showed that they were not looking for the truth. The least one can say is that the question of principles, which according to Bishop Follet's own words in 2006, must be necessarily resolved. So principles must be resolved so as to conclude any agreement with Rome, have not been resolved at all. Logically, this observation should have ended by informing the Roman authorities that there could be no consideration of an agreement, as Archbishop Lefebvre had demonstrated to Pope John Paul II in 1988. We believe it preferable to wait for times more propitious for the return of Rome to tradition. That was Archbishop Lefebvre's letter to Pope John Paul II, June 2nd, 1988. So in other words, we're going to wait until Rome comes back. And that makes perfect sense, right? So has Rome yet come back? 2025, September 15th?
Not even close.
No, not even close. What happened last week? Perverts marching into St. Peter's with his approval, and he didn't denounce it or condemn it. You know, someone might say, well, the Pope didn't know about it. They snuck behind his back. Well, then he would have come out thundering. I did not approve this. This is condemnable. We're going to make reparation publicly. So, to Michael Matt's credit of the remnant, at least he's going to he's trying to organize some rosary of reparation, which is good. And we could do that today when we go pray at the shrine of La Salette in reparation for what happened in Rome. All right. So Archbishop Lefebvre, very sound, very peaceful, no playing games and no wording semantics, somersaults. Just, if they don't have the faith, we wait till Rome comes back and pray for them. It was not, bottom of page 14, it was not done. And in September 2011, Cardinal Lavada, then prefect for the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, presented Bishop Follet with a doctrinal preamble. This is the doctrinal declaration. Okay, this is a very important point of history right here. So Cardinal Lavada wrote the doctrinal declaration. He submitted it first to Bishop Follet. In preparation for an agreement, he intensified pressure during the following months. Page 15. Worried about the way in which things were evolving, on April 7th, 2012, Bishops Tissier de Mallory, de Galaretta, and Williamson, so the three writing to the one, signed a common letter addressed to the General Council of the Society, saying, quote, this is a very important letter. This letter was released thanks to Father Paul Kimball, who released it on internet and made it public. And that's why he's being punished in South Africa for the last 12 years. But he did a great service to the whole church and to all the society priests. Because this was good to, when I read this, that's what woke me up. And I realized this is very serious, what's going on now. I mean, I knew, but when I saw Bishop Follet's response to this letter, I knew he's gone. He's going in the way of St. Peter's and all the way of all flesh, we could say. Okay, read the three bishops to the one. Who's up? Go ahead, please, loud and clear, Anthony.
For
several months, as many people know, the General Council of the Society of St. Pius X has seriously been considering Roman proposals for a practical agreement after the doctrinal discussions of 2009 to 2011 proved that a doctrinal agreement is impossible with present-day Rome.
Louder.
If there were an agreement, the Pope would accept us within the framework of relativistic and dialectical pluralism with the proviso that we should remain in full communion in relation to the authority and to other ecclesiastical entities. For this reason, the Roman authorities can tolerate that the society continue to teach Catholic doctrine, but they will absolutely not permit that it condemn conciliar teachings. That is why an even purely practical agreement would necessarily silence, little by little, the society and any critic of the council or the new mass by the society.
Okay, stop. Very important sentence. For this reason, say the three bishops, and they were 100% correct. The Roman authorities can tolerate that the SSPX continue to teach Catholic doctrine. Yeah, you can teach your catechism and give your sermons, but they will not permit that it condemn
conciliar teaching.
Yeah, don't condemn Vatican II. You can critique it, criticize it, but don't condemn it. That is why an even purely practical agreement would necessarily do what to the society?
Silence it.
Silence it, and you cannot, any critique of the council or the new mass by the society would be eventually silenced. And that's what's happening in the last 12 years, 13 years now. Read on.
By ceasing to attack the most important of all the victories of the revolution, the poor society would necessarily cease being opposed to the universal apostasy of our sad times and would get bogged down. Ultimately, who will guarantee that we will remain protected from the Roman Curia and the bishops? The Pope? Your Excellencies, Fathers, do be careful. You are leading the society to a point from which it will no longer be able to turn back, to a deep division of no return, and to destructive, powerful influences with which the society will not be able to cope if you come to such an agreement.
There it is, April 7th, 2012, letter of the three bishops of the General Council. And then, that was a great letter. It's all right. But the answer of Bishop Fillet was a nightmare. He accused the three bishops of having a sedevacantist attitude, schismatic mentality. And no, we're not schismatic, but the Pope is being bad and we just have to oppose him. And the fight is going longer than we expected. They got tired of the war. 4.2, change of orientation. On April 14th, Bishop Fillet responded to the three bishops, so 7 days later, expressing his disagreement with their letter. On April 15th, 2012, he signed the
Doctrinal Declaration
intended to enable an agreement with Rome, and which would put into question the fight that tradition had been waging. So in it contained recognition of the legitimacy of the promulgation of the new Mass, the new sacraments, and the new canon law. Implicit recognition of the new profession of faith demanded of all superiors by Rome. Footnote 37, the most egregious section, quote, moreover, says the Doctrinal Declaration, I adhere with religious submission of will and intellect to the teachings which either the Roman Pontiff or the College of Bishops enunciate when they exercise their authentic magisterium, even if they do not intend to proclaim these teachings by a definitive act. So what's the authentic magisterium? Vatican II, right? Okay, that's the footnote. A profession that Archbishop Lefebvre considered an official act of joining the conciliar church. So the profession of faith, it was issued in 1985 by Cardinal Ratzinger, which was for the indult crowd. You can have your Latin Mass, but you got to sign this profession of faith like St. Peter's had to, that you accept Vatican II in the light of tradition, that you accept the legitimacy of the new Mass. In other words, you accept Vatican II in the new Mass. So that was always condemned by the SSPX, Archbishop Lefebvre. Here, Bishop Fillet accepts it. You see how serious this is? Right? And he put it in fuzzy language, but it's all there. And also, it included a declaration that, quote, Vatican II clarifies, that is, deepens and makes more explicit over time certain aspects of the life and doctrine of the Church. Footnote 39, that section 3, colon 4 of the Doctrinal Declaration of April 15th, 2012. We read on. This declaration threw the society into great confusion. A new general chapter was convoked in July 2012. This chapter appeared to be a compromise so as to save the society's structure, which was on the point of exploding. So many priests were complaining to Bishop Fillet. And then in the general chapter statement of July 2012, that's the statement that all the priests and Bishop Fillet signed. I remember Father Stanish and I were actually, and a third person were walking I think we did 480 miles on foot from Burgos to Santiago to Compostela in Spain. We got to say Mass on the tomb, the bones of St. James the Apostle. And I remember we got an inn to spend the night, to sleep and get a shower and stuff. And Father Stanich just got the facts of the general chapter statement, because I was doing penance for of course my sins and for all the society not to go into the modernist direction. And what to do if they do. So I remember Father Stanich reading the general chapter statement. And he said, see, it's good. Nothing's changed. And I said, wait a minute, reread that last sentence. Right in the middle of it. And he read it again, and that was the clincher. And from memory it says, we approve and determine to proceed towards the normalization of the society basically that. We approve and determine. We are determined to proceed with the normalization of the society and something. But those were the key words. So we approve to go through with the normalization of the society, which is the canonical recognition. And I told Father, there it is. That's the catch. It's a little sneaky phrase, sentence right in the middle of it. And he said, well, no, that couldn't be what they mean. Well, it is. And here, this is great because this is not coming from resistance priests in the society. This is coming from the Dominican fathers who are seeing the same thing and saying the same thing. That's why it's valuable. Because people don't believe us, but they might believe the Dominicans. And of course, traditionally they're the think tanks of the church. All right, last paragraph, page 15. It was a compromised chapter because the general chapter, July 2012, because it made room for the new orientations that were being introduced into the society little by little over the course of several years, in which most likely had the backing of numerous members. So the distinction between the Catholic Church and the Conciliar Church is not resumed. The fight for Christ the King is not restored to the heart of our action. The current deviations of the official hierarchy, which are dangerous to the faith, are no longer attacked. And, quote, while things are not resolved on the level of principles, a practical agreement with Rome is not excluded, contradicting the line that Bishop Fillet still held in 2006. So that's why we can call this was Vatican II in the SSPX. And it was done quite sneakily because the doctrinal declaration, nobody knew really what it said until March of 2013, almost a year later. So it was very sneaky. And when Bishop Fillet was reading it at the general chapter of 2012, Father Four was there, and he's the one that told us this. Bishop Fillet was reading it. He didn't give everybody a copy of the doctrinal declaration, but he was reading certain parts of it. And Father DeJorna stood up and said, hey, that's the hermeneutics of Pope Benedict XVI. That's modernism. And Father Peglariani, Father Davide Peglariani, who's now the Superior General as a reward for this, stood up and said, how dare you give a slap in the face to the General Superior. And that settled the question, and Father Four told us this happened. And it was not discussed. But that's how they did it. So at the time, Father Pfeiffer was, Father DeJorna never got punished. He's a professor at Econ. He never got punished for what he said. Everybody else got punished. Even priests who didn't say anything, but didn't agree with what was going on. But they might have told their fellow priests, I don't agree with this. They were punished. Father Sauer was kicked to the streets in Germany, an old society priest. So Father DeJorna, he never was punished. So Father Pfeiffer always wondered, in his better days when he saw clearly, he always wondered if Father DeJorna might have been set up to do that in order to, immediately cut any reaction from the priests against the doctrinal declaration. Because he never was punished. Everyone else was punished. All right, the chapter then speaks about 6 conditions that would allow a practical agreement without a doctrinal agreement. So you see the overthrow of the principle established by Archbishop Lefebvre in the 2006 General Chapter meeting. Are you following? So 2006, no agreement unless it's first doctrine, then practical agreement. 2012, they're talking about we're going to have 6 conditions to make a practical agreement, but no talk about the doctrinal agreement first. So you got an overthrow. It's a revolution. Some of the conditions are sine qua non, and others are qualified as only desirable. Oh, here they are. And they're just laughable, really lamentable. The first condition, sine qua non, is, first condition for the agreement with Rome. Read it clearly and loud, Michael.
The freedom to keep, transmit, and teach the sacred doctrine of the constant magisterium of the Church and of the unchangeable truth of divine tradition. The freedom to defend the truths, to correct and reprove, even publicly, those who promote the Second Vatican Council's errors or novelties of modernism or liberalism and their consequences.
Okay, it kind of sounds okay, right, at first. Doesn't sound too shocking, right? But first, what's the constant magisterium? Vatican II, conciliar church, or the traditional church? You see these failures to distinguish, right? And then, what's this about freedom to defend the truth, to correct and reprove even publicly? Those, the people, the bishops, cardinals, or whoever, but who promote the errors. But what about attacking the errors themselves and condemning Vatican II itself? You see there's some sneaky curveballs in this phrase, right? Bishop Fillet, Tissi de Mahler, and Dick Alaretta briefly addressed in substance this demand of the 2012 General Chapter in their common declaration made 1 year later, on June 27, 2013, for the 25th anniversary of the 1988 Episcopal consecrations. Quote, when Rome explicitly acknowledges our right to profess integrally the faith and to reject the errors which oppose it, with the right and the duty for us to oppose publicly the errors and the proponents of these errors, whoever they may be. So that was the declaration of the SSPX bishops on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the Episcopal consecrations, June 1988 to June 2013. So this June 2013 was supposed to be the patch-up for the 2012 doctrinal declaration. It was a pretend patch-up. 5 days later, during the meeting of the superiors of the religious communities held at Saint Nicolas de Chardonnay in Paris, Bishop Follet said that, quote, this demand protected us insofar as it would only be able to be granted by a converted pope. Note well, NB, nota bene, it can be noted that, first point, Dom Girard, when he had obtained the so-called official recognition of his Benedictine monastery, La Barroue in France, in 1988, had demanded and received from Cardinal Ratzinger, quote, that no silence be imposed upon his anti-modernist preaching. This did not stop him from keeping quiet from the moment he signed, and then over time justifying the errors of Vatican II, like all the Ecclesia Dei communities, without exception. So they're promised, you can preach against Vatican II and against modernism. But since they're now under the superiors that formed them, they all automatically grow what? Silent against the errors. Because after all, the Pope is so good to us as to let us have our Latin Mass, and we can have this and we can have that, and you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you.
Exactly.
So you're put in a position of silently being put to silence.
It's a psychological pressure. It's like
Yeah.
they know that these people gave them benefit. They can even promise, I won't tell you not to be silent or to be silent. But that doesn't matter, because as soon as you walk into the room, you realize that you can't say certain things or else you'll offend them. And
Exactly.
in offending him, he could just one day say, okay, you can't say the Mass anymore.
Right.
Special Mass.
Right.
So,
So Father de Cockere, he says precisely that. I think he was in a diocese, he was a society priest when he was in Marseille. I think it was Marseille, in southern France. I think they had some fire or flood in the society chapel. And they asked the bishop if they could use a church. And the bishop let him use one of the churches in the diocese for the society mass. And Father de Cockere honestly admits, while I was preaching, since the bishop gave us this favor, I could feel the pressure to, tone it down a bit. Don't attack the bishop's modernism. Don't attack the new mass that was going to be said in the diocese. So he felt that pressure. And he realized, this is a real thing. It's a real tactic.
And taking money from the Jews, being funded by the Jews while you're trying to preach against the Jews.
Right.
It's gonna work.
Right. That's why, like state accreditation, you get all these grants and benefits from the Masonic state. Well, you got to show your gratitude by, tone it down a bit. Very dangerous, right? Very, very dangerous. This did not stop him from keeping quiet from that moment that he signed, and then over time justifying the errors of Vatican II, like all the Ecclesia Dei communities have done without exception. Next point. One can also see that even before having signed anything, the general house of the society has ceased to fight against the Roman scandals, and this since several years. So this is even before the 2012 agreement. Seeking to obtain a recognition, the society does not want to upset their Roman contacts by continual attacks. Once the society has obtained so-called recognition, after so much effort, how will they not be able all the more be silent so as not to lose the said recognition? Attacking scandals would lead at least to a protest by the diocesan bishop, who would then seek to force Rome to silence the society. In 2011, a simple fit by Cardinal Levada regarding a very strong and very courageous press release by Father de Cacare, that's that letter against Assisi, against the Assisi meeting, was enough to keep Menzingen from issuing a press release against the scandalous meeting.
Cowards.
Yeah. So it is said that when Bishop Williamson, in that famous interview in Switzerland or Germany, remember the famous interview about the 6 million, and he just said it's a historic point, and I don't agree with it, and all that broke, right? Well, Benedict XVI was just about to approve the agreement, and give all to the society, and this happened with Bishop Williamson, and he realized, oh, not all the bishops are united, and then he realized the letter of the three, oh, they're not all united here, so that's why it didn't go through as a public recognition, publicly declared, because Pope Benedict, stepped back, Next point, the 2012 General Chapter had also provided 3 desirable conditions for accepting an agreement with Rome. It is astounding to see that the chapter members were able to ask for the exemption of the SSPX houses in regard to diocesan bishops as merely a desirable condition. So, in other words, we desire to be exempted from being under the diocesan bishops. It's just a little desire. Very sneaky, very, very slippery. And remember, Father Paul Morgan was on this general chapter. He's the bishop with Bishop Williamson. He was there. He's never denounced this all publicly. He was there. He signed it. He signed the general chapter statement of 2012. He never denounced it publicly. He still has to. I wouldn't trust him until he does, because he was going right along with this, and he punished the editor and other members of the Ignis Ardens, which was a website exposing this liberal direction in the society. So the editor of the Recusant we used to put articles on Ignis Ardens, and he was threatened to be refused communion by Bishop Morgan. So I know Father Paul Morgan. I've met him. He's a good priest, but I wish he would come out clear on these points. He has to, for the good of the church. Next, read the boxed part there, Guadalupe.
The official abandonment by the General Chapter of 2012 of the principle no practical agreement without doctrinal agreement places tradition in an extremely dangerous situation.
Yes, so doctrine not first, practical first. Very dangerous. Seeking to connect the dots. All these changes certainly have a cause. How can it be explained? It is not necessary to imagine a meeting of the Society Council that would one day decide this new orientation. Things happen rather slowly because of the extremely frequent contacts with the conciliar church. And here Grec comes in. The Grec, G-R-E-C, Groupe de Réflexion entre Catholiques, group of reflection between Catholics, Grec. Meetings that began in 1998 must be addressed. From 1998 to 2010, or over the time of at least 12 years, discreet but not secret meetings took place in Paris, sometimes even monthly, between representatives of official church hierarchy, especially the French bishops, some Ecclesia Dei group representatives, and some members of the... Yes, so apparently Father LaRue might have been among them, but certainly Father Laurens, Father Duchalard, and Father Schmidberger, and I think Father Buschcourt too. and Pivert. No, not Pivert, sorry, not Pivert. Pivert is a good guy. Pfluger, Father Nicholas Pfluger. So 12 years of preparation before the 2012 explosion. So you see this? Grech explains the mindsets being molded for the revolution. Very important. I know this is long, but it's important. If you're going to be in this fight, you got to have this clear. And I really appreciate this document, among many other documents they did, because it just puts everything in a chronological form. So what was the goal of the Grech? To speak without getting angry about things that make one angry. So in other words, what?
Fluffy.
Fluffy tea party. That's what. Well, French. What do? They don't. That's not British. British have a tea party. The French would have what?
Wine and cheese.
Wine and cheese party. Yes. To speak without getting angry about things that make one angry. In order to promote the necessary reconciliation. So in another study done by the Dominicans, they go into Father Michel Lalonde, who's the one that organized this. And his dream was to get the SSPX to reconcile with Rome. That was his long-term goal, to silence the SSPX, get them to tone down, lay down their weapons, get castrated, and enter the bunny rabbit farm. On Rome's side, the Secretary of State knew about the meeting since 1998. So this is in the 90s. Nobody knows about this. Bishop Fellay is doing this behind everybody's back, and it's sneaky. Then Cardinal Castrillon Hoyos, then prefect of the Ecclesia Dei Commission, Cardinal Ratzinger, the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and other numerous Vatican personalities. When Cardinal Ratzinger attained the Supreme Pontificate, Grech began to have direct contact with the Pope. In order to understand what was the spirit of these meetings, it is enough to refer to the letter the Grech members sent to Benedict XVI on October 28, 2008. Far from imploring the Pope to accept putting Vatican II in question, those responsible for Grech sent him a very ambiguous letter, making it seem as if the SSPX were the one in an abnormal situation. Thanking Benedict XVI for the 2007 motu proprio on the traditional Mass, which so-called released the Mass, and soliciting the lifting of the 1988 excommunications in 2009, they concluded, quote, hoping that this will be for the SSPX an occasion to regularize its canonical situation and to be able to manifest in this way its desire to enter once again into full communion with the Holy Father. Close quote, page 18. It is important to point out here that Father Laurent's SSPX was part of the directing committee of the Grech and worked as an intermediary between the group and Bishop Fellay. Therefore, he must have signed this letter. In any case, he did not deny it. How can it not be feasible that 12 years of conversations made in this spirit will not end in undermining society authorities? In addition, Bishop Fellay varies his very frequent trips to Rome after his meeting with Cardinal Castrillon Hoyos during the Jubilee year 2000 should not be forgotten. So he frequently went to Rome to meet. And I remember a seminarian telling me at that time, this was 2013, and he said, Bishop Fellay was just here at the seminary. He told us he's not been meeting with Rome. He has had no meetings with Rome. And then I remember just about a few weeks later, it came out publicly, he was exactly meeting with them during 2013. So it wasn't honest. Or the seminarian wasn't honest, but someone was not honest. And I know this seminarian as a high school boy, he's not a liar. In addition, Bishop Fellay's very frequent trips to Rome. At the meeting of religious superiors of St. Nicolas de Chardonnay, October 27, 2011, Bishop Fillet shared these words by some friends he had in the Vatican. Quote, "If you know what is happening in Rome, you would not go there. Without a doubt, it would have been necessary to apply this advice, if not according to the letter, at least by only going occasionally, as the 2006 chapter said." Okay, read everything that in the box there, Gavril. These multiple
contacts with the conciliar church, along with the desire for a canonical recognition, are the logical causes of these new orientations of which we just spoke. The doctrine of Christ the King, that is no longer at the heart of our fight. The conciliar church confused with the Catholic Church, the silence before the current Roman scandals.
Yes, so all this is like smashing the bastions of the last resistance. However, doesn't all of this make us appear more and more like the Ecclesia Dei communities? On April 7th, 2012, Bishop Tissia de Malere, de Galareta, and Williamson wrote to Bishop Fillet, quote, "Doesn't one see already in the society symptoms of a lessening in its confession of the faith? The nominations of August 15th, 2014 are going to accentuate this tendency because the supporters of this new spirit are in the most of the key positions." So Father Bouchecourt, he's the one I quoted this morning as saying the Jews did not commit deicide in a public interview down in Buenos Aires. He's moved to France. Father Wagner, who brought in the new branding and said, we're no longer going to have the Angelus magazine. It's no longer going to be militant. It's going to be focused on, we're going to focus more on aesthetics, Gregorian chants, and architecture. So no longer the fight for the faith, but let's drink tea and discuss Roman arches and freestanding altars. Father Wagner is sent to the U.S., Father Couture into Canada. Father Couture was an old good fighter, but he somehow caved in also. And then Father Stalin was sent to Asia. Of course, and Father Peter Scott was sent to South Africa as a punishment. Because in April, I remember calling Father Peter Scott. And we were at that very time, and we were talking about this. And Father Peter Scott said, yeah, I just preached against this. And he said, we cannot make an agreement with Rome. This is not the time. And he quotes Archbishop Lefebvre. He was instantly called the next day by this district superior of Canada, which happened to be, who was it? Father...
Boyle.
No, that's a long time ago. I think it was Father Couture at the time. No, it was another priest. It was Father Wagner. Yeah, it was Father Wagner. And Wagner would... Well, anyway, the district superior called Father Peter Scott and demanded his transfer. But what happened was, it was the school year, and he was in the school, and the faithful complained and said, you can't just take him out of here, we have to finish the school year. So they waited, and then Father Peter Scott was punished being sent to South Africa. He's still there. He's still there. Him and Father Kimball are still being punished. Father Peter Scott is a great priest. He was a great warrior. He was a good district superior. He's doctrinally solid, but he should be with us. He should be the one running the seminary, not me. He should be the one. And maybe he'll hear this. I hope he will. Father Peter Scott, if you do hear this, you're most welcome to come, as long as you make a doctrinal statement. You condemn all these liberalism and of the new SSPX, and come and help continue the work of Archbishop Lefebvre. He really should be the one here. And he's far better. He's far better. But, he was always a bulldog, and he needs to come out. He needs to come back to the fight of tradition. I know he's doing his best, but you can't deny all this that happened, right? And these are not SSPX members. So it's an extra proof of the disaster that's happened, right? Because it's not me telling you, we're just reading the study done by the Dominicans, which is, it's a lot better than me telling you. However, doesn't all of this make us appear more and more like the Ecclesia Dei communities? All right, of course, deep down it seems that for the present authorities of the SSPX, there is a profound lack of understanding of Archbishop Lefebvre's fight. Isn't that true? Especially with the new young priests. They don't know anymore. The Archbishop is just some fluffy grandpa who, liked the Latin Mass, wanted an agreement with Rome, and, little misunderstandings, but it was ironed out by Bishop Fillet. So all is now in peace and happiness. They don't understand Archbishop Lefebvre. And that's why when we get this book published by Father Pivert in English, finally, God willing, Our Lady interceding, I hope everyone will read it, because that's the real Archbishop Lefebvre. And we're reading the real one throughout this document as well. All right, we're almost finished here. Towards a recognition of tolerance, ? A new phase seems to have begun as of September 23rd, 2014, with the extremely cordial discussion between Bishop Fillet and his two assistants, Father Pfluger and Nelly, in Rome with Cardinal Mueller, prefect of the congregation for the doctrine of the faith, and 3 archbishops. That's 2014 now, right? The final press release, published on the very day by the Vatican, tells us that, quote, it was decided to proceed gradually and over a reasonable period of time in order to overcome difficulties and with a view to the envisioned full recognition. Footnote, typical expression used by the Conciliar Rome in the ecumenical dialogue, to overcome difficulties. And Bishop Fillet started using that language. I remember, to overcome difficulties. Since when is life without difficulties, he says in another interview.
I remember that.
Right. In 46, footnote, Bishop Fillet and Cardinal Mueller discuss a gradual move towards full recognition. That's taken from the Vatican Insider website, article dated September 23rd, 2014. So Bishop Fillet, basically, he never denied, see my little note on the side, never denied this quote, that they're working towards full recognition. He never came out and said, no, this is not true. Cardinal Mueller misquoted me. He never said that. Next point. An internal letter by Bishop Fillet to his priests, October 2nd, 2014, told them that firstly, is that the first level, ? Rome requests that members of the SSPX have informal meetings with bishops. So start meeting with the bishops. So here at Syracuse, the young Father Richard Boyle, he meets with the local bishop on friendly terms, and the bishop has allowed him to use his churches for their mass, sandwiched between Novus Ordo masses. Father, the one in Florida, Father Van Waa, he is on very friendly terms with the local bishop. In fact, he arranged for Bishop Tissier to use their Novus Ordo All Saints or Holy Angels Parish Church, which wasn't even a traditional altar, it was a Novus Ordo altar. They just set it facing the wall. But the altar's in the middle, it's a freestanding altar, Novus Ordo. Bishop Snyder met in Winona, in Flavigny, in Zeitskofen. These are my little notes over here. Cardinal Brandmuller came to Zeitskofen at the seminary of the society in Germany on friendly terms. In Cincinnati, in the society, what's the name of the town there in Kentucky? Walton. The local bishop came and blessed the children and had a friendly visit with the school. So what message does that give to the kids? You know what? Well, there's a local bishop. We're on friendly terms. So this isn't so bad. We're not at war. He says new mass. We say old mass. Well, Maybe when I get married, we could use one of his pretty churches. It's a lot more pretty than our society chapels. You see what's going on here? I remember this fax going out. I was already in Kentucky. We started the seminary there. And at the time, Bishop Williamson was very supportive. But anyway, 2014, this is about the time when Bishop Williamson starts taking the turn and starts promoting all these new novelties about new Mass, miracles, new Mass gives grace, right? And that's when the recusant, but also the Catholic Trumpet just released recently the telephone recording of Bishop Williamson, where he says, I'm being offered a deal. I have to look into it. And that's about this time, 2013, 14-ish. And Father Pfeiffer told him at the time, don't look in any deals. That's caught us into a lot of trouble already. But it's after that Bishop Williamson shifted gears. And then he put away your toys. I'm not going to continue the work of Archbishop Lefebvre. Put away your toys. These meetings did begin. December 5th, 2014, Cardinal Walter Brandmuller, fervent disciple of Pope Benedict XVI, met Bishop Follet and some SSPX priests in the seminary of the Society in Zeitskofen, Germany. And Bishop Follet asked Bishop Athanasius Snyder, the best disciple of Benedict XVI, to visit the seminaries in Flavigny, France, Winona, USA, in January, February 2015. He already gave a conference to the seminary in Zeitskofen, Germany, spring 2014, invited by the director, Father Schmidberger. The website of the SSPX District of France on October 6, 2014, published a document by Don Pio Pace, a priest, which made the following analysis. So this is Pope Francis in the Pastoral on the Synod in the SSPX, a guest piece by Don Pio Pace from the website roraticelliblogspot.com. Read this loud and clear. Who's up? Go ahead, Perrin.
The contacts between the SSPX superiors and the Roman offices in charge of the SSPX files had never reached such a high level of cordiality.
Jean-Marie Dumont.
Jean-Marie Dumont, a correspondent for French Catholic Monthly of
Famille Chrétienne.
Famille Chrétienne, even mentions a discreet visit by
Monsignor Guido Pozzo.
Monsignor Guido Pozzo, secretary of the Ecclesia Dei Commission, to recon. He more likely means to the General House of the Society of St. Pius X in Menzingen, also in Switzerland. In fact, that this fashion of considering the Lefebvre question is itself pastoral.
Louder.
To ask of Bishop Follet, as it was done under Benedict XVI, to sign laborious doctrinal declarations was only essential insofar as the SSPX fell into line with the
Hermeneutic of continuity.
hermeneutic of continuity.
Which means interpret Vatican II in the positive light. Go on. But as paradoxical as it may seem at a first untrained glance, go on, freed
from all
restorationist
fixations and scruples, there is no further further unease with the gap between pastoral and dogmatic, so much so that the criticism of the council in the name of dogma by the Society of St. Pius X that disturbed Benedict so much does not disturb Francis at all. In the worst cases, it actually strengthens him.
So in other words, dogma is put on the back burner. Dogma is not so important, where the society is willing to be more practical and understanding and be agreeable. Vatican II, dogma is not so important anymore. So they step into the trap. According to this analysis, that seems to reflect the state of the spirit of the current pontificate. The doctrinal question is so secondary for Pope Francis that he would seem to be able to grant us a recognition of tolerance, all the more able to consider us as less and less a bother for the conciliar church, since we resemble the Ecclesia Dei communities more and more. So they're not so much a thorn in the side anymore, the SSPX, because they've become cotton balls. Cotton balls don't prick you, but thorns do. Tacks do. Nails do. So once society became cotton balls, they didn't trouble modernist Rome anymore. So Pope Francis could smile and grant them jurisdiction for confessions, which he did, marriages, which he did, and holy orders, which he did. In this perspective, contacts with bishops then become a necessary first step. Such a recognition, already beginning more or less in practice, would result little by little in the dissolution of tradition into the conciliar church, in the gradual disappearance of what Archbishop Lefebvre described on May 30th, 1988, this family that represents what remains of the real Catholic Church. So dissolve the Catholic resistance. Finish it. Drown it out with ecumenism. And that is actually in the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. We will drown out all resistance by liberalism. Yeah.
So in other words, you could almost put it that the society doing with their agreement with Rome is basically in the same simplified, you could say, it's as a a Catholic man or woman gets married to a Protestant. In order to get married to them, they have to compromise their faith in order to please this Protestant if the Protestant's not going to convert. So in the best circumstance, the Catholic, if he wants to marry this woman who's Protestant, he has to wait till she's Catholic before they get married.
That's true. I mean, in the light of, from the perspective of the importance of the faith, you're right. You're right.
So that'd be the same as the society. It's the same as that one who wants to marry this Protestant, he just wants to get married to them. He doesn't care about the faith. He just and then he'll lose the faith because
if he or she who marries the Protestant, if he's not strong and not strong at first, he gradually gets eroded and becomes Protestant themselves. It does happen. All right, finally the conclusion. Here we go. And then we're done. This document is golden. And let's look at the conclusion. It is certain that this painful crisis is God's punishment for tradition that has become worldly and soft these past few years, and which now seeks a recognition so as to no longer be persecuted, so as to lead an easier life where the official authorities will accept us, quote, as we are, opening their churches to us for our ceremonies. The consequent obligations for Catholics who want to remain faithful are clear. So what must we Catholics do who fight on? First, what?
Study.
Second, what?
Be informed about the crisis in the church by reading and studying good books. Alone as a family within a study group, especially the works of Archbishop Lefebvre.
Third, lead a
Truly Catholic life, fervent and not worldly, beginning with regular participation in spiritual retreats when possible.
And lastly,
Pray continually for grace.
okay, and then this document ends with that letter, which is quoted in the first conference. So there it is. Anybody have any comments or questions before we finalize?
We have back home the original Angelus edition with that letter of Bishop Fillet talking about Compros Brazil when they compromised. And he did say, there was a little comment by him, I don't remember the exact words, where he said, we will use them as an example of how we would be treated if we made an agreement. So you can kind of see there is, in the back of his mind at least, the idea of an agreement even then.
True. Yes. In 2001, in an interview with La Liberté paper in France, that's when he said, we do accept 95% of Vatican II. That was 2001. So that was very early. And I never knew that quote until later. But then he repeated it in 2023. So,
It's almost amazing how much evidence there is against the position that Bishop Fillet later took. You could almost take a pendulum of all of his own sayings in interviews before roughly 2009 and
Yeah.
use it against him after.
well, in fact,
It's crazy.
In fact, you can find a lot of these good quotes of Bishop Fillet that condemn him after in the book titled, Is This Operation Suicide? By Stephen Fox. He's the brother of Father Damien Fox. He's a lawyer down in Australia. Excellent document. He put it out in 2012. Excellent paper. You can find it on internet. You can get the PDF, get the booklet made in paper. And maybe that'll be we'll have to study that as a group here in the oratory, but it's very well done. But he does exactly that. He shows the pre-Bishop Fillet and the post-Bishop Fillet. So we can say there's a pre-Bishop Williamson, which was dynamite, and then the post-Bishop Williamson, the last 10 years really of his life.
What was his first name, the author?
Stephen Fox. It's very good. Is This Operation Suicide? By Stephen Fox. It's excellent. And he goes through all the traditional communities who fought for the faith, but one by one they all compromised with modernist Rome. And all on promises, you can keep your Latin Mass and you can preach against modernism. But they all cave in from the pressure. So,
You can see, like, you almost would think that some of these prelates are infiltrators from the beginning, but on the other hand, you can see how slippery the slope is when you take that one step. That
yeah.
it doesn't. You can't say that you can't always say that they're infiltrators, because they could have been very Catholic and they really wanted to be Catholic and fight, but once they took that one step without thinking in the correct mindset, they just slide.
Yeah, and we're all in danger of that. It's a grace. The Archbishop used to say it's a grace if we can profess the faith and persevere in it till the day we die. It's a grace. So we have to be remembering that too, with the work of continuing, humbly trying to continue the work of Archbishop Lefebvre in tradition. We put all our trust in Our Lady, and she keep us from all compromise and error. And that's a grace. So, but, God did give to us a clear example. All that we needed to know to guide us through this crisis, the Archbishop said everything we need to know to guide us. And he told his bishops, don't seek any agreements, don't make any stupid moves until we have a...
Perfectly
Catholic.
I mean, it can't be more clear. If they just stuck with that, the society would be a powerhouse right now, Rome would really fear, and the Masons would fear. But now, we have to continue. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Our Lady of Sorrows,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph of Arimathea,
Pray for us.
Saint John,
Pray for us.
benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et mania semper. Amen.